Today, we're continuing in our character creation series and talking about character class. I still haven't thought of a better name than Ezra for our example character, so we'll go ahead and choose a class for him today. Welcome to Geek Philosophy, where we explore our love of geeky wisdom. If you're new to the channel, my name is Brian, and we release videos weekly, so please consider subscribing and turning on the notifications so you don't miss out on anything. Okay, so like I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to continue our series about character creation, and one thing you may have noticed is that the format's changed a little bit, and we're just trying something new, so let me know in the comments what you think. This is to go along with what we switched to doing to the follow-up videos to our live stream, which is our Behind the Screens campaign videos. And I think that this is more informal. It's a way for me to just talk to the camera. I've got my computer going. I've got resources available. And so, yeah, it's less edited, and you'll give me a chance to just kind of go through what I think off the top of my head. And you can tell it's from my very famously decorated, brand new, and not digitally enhanced at all office. Okay, so let's start. Character class. Well, if we're going to jump into character classes, let's start with the first one. And so when I mean the first one, it's the first one in order of alphabetical appearance in the player's handbook. So we start with Barbarian, and I think a lot of times we get the idea that barbarians are always this fierce warrior, but they're from some crazy civilization, and maybe it's the historical term, but not always the case, right? Yes, fierce warrior. Yes, probably primitive background, but not in a derogatory sense. Primitive meaning they come from a society that is not as technologically enhanced, or they are just tribal by nature. And there are a lot of different options for this. There's a lot of different ways to make this happen. In any case, one of the things that are probably the most iconic about barbarians is their battle rage. And especially in recent years, since Critical Role has hit and Travis Willingham's Grog character said, "I would like to rage." I think there's a lot more people playing barbarians that are now saying that, so I think it's awesome. And Barbarian is an awesome class. Then we have bards. To be honest, from the days that I started playing, I didn't give bards much credit. Early days in first edition and second edition, bards weren't as thought of as a heroic class as much as they were thought of as a who wants to play a bard type of class. But credit where credit is due. I am a changed man on the course of the bard. Bards are great. They come from a role-playing standpoint of being an entertainer, but they also have magic, and that magic comes from that entertainment. Now, it's usually based in music or some other type of art form, like giving speeches or being an orator, or the enjoyment of plays or rhymes or poetry. You can do whatever you want with this, but just the fact of being able to inspire others makes you a very versatile character. So you have a variety of abilities as a bard. You've got the magic, you've got still the ability to fight, you've got some swordplay involved or whatever weapon you choose. You even have some healing magic in there. So I think they are a very well-rounded class, but they lean towards more being a support type of character when it comes to battle, in my opinion. And there are a lot of different ways to play it, but in the end, I was wrong about bards. I was I was wrong when I was a little kid, but in the end, I was wrong about bards. Bards are pretty awesome. Okay, clerics, one of the iconic classes of D&D, one of the first ones in the game, and they are pulling in their power from the divine. So that's usually tied to some type of pantheon or a single god. Just depends on your campaign, which means they're a member of the religious order. If you can hear on the mic, one of our cats, this happens to be Crystal's cat, I can hear him meowing and he's saying he would like to rage. Maybe we should go back to Barbarian. All right, we'll keep plugging on because I think, you know, he's going to be doing that for a while. So if you hear him, it is what it is. Internet's full of cats. So I go back to being a member of religious order, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are a priest that is in flowing gowns like the wonderful picture I have here. A cleric can also be in full battle armor and swinging a mace or what other weapon they would like to use and really tear it up on the battlefield. So there's a lot that you could do there. However, you will likely be counted on for your healing ability if you choose to play cleric. Even though you are an able combatant, most of the healing spells in the game are tied to the cleric. So it's a great class to play. It's going to make you a lot of friends if you decide to play a cleric. I know back in the day we didn't want to sometimes because we wanted to be the heroes, but I would also say, if I could tell my younger self, clerics were the heroes. They were the ones pulling everybody out of the fire. So kudos to the clerics. Okay, so druids are like clerics of nature. That's really bad. Don't go with that description, anybody. They are at one with nature, and they commune with nature, and they derive their power from nature. And then back in the day, they used to actually be classified almost as a cleric or in the priest perspective, but they are a lot more than that. In addition to the divine type of spells that they get from nature, they are able to transform into different creatures. They can, if they've seen an animal before, are they familiar with an animal, they can turn into that animal. Now, it depends on your class, and your ability to transform is tied to the rating of the monster that you're allowed to turn into. But when you get higher levels, it's not just, I said monster, but it's really animal. But it's not tied to animals. When you get higher level, it's tied to those in the primal realm. So you could actually turn into an element of fire or water or air when you get to be a high enough druid. It's crazy what you can do. And that means that you're pretty versatile, right? So in addition to the spells that you cast, you can also transform into a bear and just maul somebody. In addition to having a little bit of healing magic. A Swiss Army knife type of character. Okay, probably the iconic character in D&D, and you'll know when I go back through some of the history in just a few minutes, you'll see that this was probably the first character class in the game. Although it wasn't called this back then, you'll see. Iconic combatant, but also there's a variety of choices. So you don't have to be armored up swinging a two-handed sword as a fighter. You can be an archer. You can be a dexterous fighter with a rapier. A lot of times those things get put into the hands of other classes, but really as a fighter, the field is open. You can do what you want because you're a master of arms and armor. You can use any weapon. You can use any armor. And depending on how you build your character, you're going to be awesome at it. Lots of role-playing involved. Everything from being a leader, tactician, to just being a brute force combat kind of guy. So, or gal. You choose. You're the player. Do what you want. Okay, then there is the monk. And we're talking classic Kung Fu theater monk, right? Like, this is not reality-based martial arts. This is the martial arts of the fantasy realm, which means that you're able to tap into your internal energy and do some pretty amazing things. There's ways to slow your fall while you're falling off a building or something to make sure that you don't take as much damage. There's ways to hit people in such a way with all the pressure points that they're stunned and they can't move. Lots of cool stuff. This also means you're always armed. As a monk, you are never without your weapons because you are the weapon. And that goes for punching things and kicking things that are only able to be hit by magic weapons. When you get high enough level, guess what? Your monk unarmed combat is considered weapons of magic. That's crazy to me, and it's awesome. There's actually a really cool quote from Campaign 2 of Critical Role, Marisha Ray. Great quote. As Beauregard kind of realizes that she's reached that level, and she says, I think I can punch ghosts now. Yeah, you can. You can punch ghosts. It's pretty cool. Okay, Paladin. So, Paladins are holy warriors, but not necessarily in the same vein as a cleric, because what's happened is they have taken an oath. They have sworn to uphold some truth, some code, or even an oath of vengeance, right? So there's a lot of different ways to spin this. The thing is, though, iconically, they're a protector of the people, though you can turn that into a lot of different things as a role player. And it's sort of the classic knight in shining armor, but again, spin it however you'd like. I think that paladins are also underrated with their abilities. They are amazing as combatants. They can defend people. They have spells which can cause some damage or boost their own abilities. They can help some other people with some support type abilities. And they can even heal by laying on hands. It's pretty crazy. Okay, then we have Ranger. So, deadly combatants, fierce warriors, but also at home in the wild. So these are the characters that are the scouts. These are the ones that are the trackers. They are the ones that can become friends with animals, just like some druids, but you know, they have that extra knack of being able to survive when other people can't. Rangers are very cool. There's a lot of literary analogs to Ranger. Probably the most famous is Aragorn from Lord of the Rings, but there are other things that you can think about. And by the way, great series about Rangers, The Ranger's Apprentice. It's a young adult type of series, but man, really well put together, focuses on Rangers, different take on things, and it's amazing. So check that out. It might inspire you to play one. Alright, the Rogue. Popular character and a classic, although used to be called Thief back in the day. Both stealthy and deadly, and with all their skills that they have, they're able to not only pick the way into a building through picking the lock, or hide on the way through a corridor to make sure that no one sees them, but they can also get right in the right spot to hit you so that it hurts and does extra damage. And maybe assassinate you, because that's an actual subclass of the Rogue. Okay, the Sorcerer. As a Sorcerer, you are born with power, meaning that your spellcasting abilities come from within and from your family line. You might have had some type of draconic blood in the past that was one of your family members, or whatever it might be. And so this bloodline helps determine what your abilities are, and it helps you enhance or augment spells that you cast, so you can cast them to be more powerful, to reach farther distances, to cause more damage, whatever it might be. Last longer, even. So sorcerers have a unique ability to be born with the powers, but also enhance their spells in such a way that is pretty unique for their class. Next in the set of final spellcasters here is the Warlock. Now, if the Sorcerer was born with it, the Warlock made a deal, and they somehow contacted some extraplanar entity, some creature from beyond, or some being from beyond, or whatever. Work with your DM and you can pick whatever makes sense for your world. And that deal is what's granting them the power that they have. So their spells are a little different, a little bit limited. There's some stuff that crosses over, but by and large, Warlocks are deadly. They have that bargain for power, which means, is it going to come due someday from a role-playing perspective? Kind of interesting. And then also, because they have that power, they're determined. Meaning, most of the time, Warlocks, you tend to have to roleplay them in such a way that you're constantly searching to figure out what your powers are, what's going on, where are they coming from, what does that mean for my next step, unless you have a really close relationship with your patron, but that's another story. Okay, the classic, the Wizard, formerly the magic user, we'll see that in a minute. They are the iconic magician, and they're the ones that are delving into the arcane secrets to figure out how to cast spells. So they're not necessarily the ones that are born with power. In fact, they weren't. They're not making a deal with someone for power. Why do that when you can figure it out yourself? So they are very versatile in the fact that because they have a wide range of abilities and a wider range of spells, they can actually kind of cobble together the perfect spell book for them, the perfect repertoire of spells for whatever purpose they're trying to pursue. So how do you make sense of all these different characters? I mean, that's a lot, right? Is it just me? A lot of classes. Let's try to put them in order. So we could characterize things by looking back a little bit. At the original D&D, there was only a few classes. You had Cleric, you had Fighting Man, that was eventually Fighter because it's kind of messed up to just call him Fighting Man, and there's Magic User. And then they eventually had Thief after that. And so these were your 4 classes that you could play, and that was kind of it. So yeah, not a whole lot of categories there. But 2nd edition expanded. So you had things like warriors, and those classes were fighters and paladins and rangers. You had wizards, and those classes were mage or specialist wizards, which were things like illusionists or other arcane spellcasters that specialized in a certain school of magic. You had priests, and that's where we get into clerics and druids. And then finally, can't forget the priests of specific mythos. We are now talking about rogues, which are thieves at that point, and bards were both considered rogues. We had a class called Thief, and that was really the earliest version, like you saw. And then bards, both of them lumped together, were considered rogues, not helping us to categorize and narrow things down. So 3rd edition must have done it better, right? Well, not really, because they didn't really categorize as much. They didn't have as many explicit categories. What they did was add variant classes. So there were more types of wizards and more types of fighters and more types of clerics, all kinds of stuff. And to make it even more complicated, later you could move into a prestige class. All this is fun, by the way, in the time that it was played, but looking back, man, it just seemed very complex. And I think that where we are now is pretty good, but let's take one step again. Instead of 2 to get to 5th, let's go to 4th, because 4th edition gets a bad rap. 4th edition, I think, did a good job in classifying in 2 different ways. The first being power source, which meant you drew your energy or your abilities from primal powers like barbarians and druids, or martial powers like fighters, rangers, and rogues, and divine power like clerics and paladins. Or you could look at it from the role that they took in the adventuring party. So that's like, am I a leader? Am I a striker? Am I a defender? Or am I a controller? Now, you can see how they're kind of breaking down here, but the thing about this, while I think it was smart and it was a good way to kind of help drive people in the right direction for what they wanted to play, man, it's a little bit, I don't know. It's harder to figure out when you look at the grand scheme of the characters, because how are we going to deal with this? Well, let's look at it. So, a decision tree. You've probably used one before. I think that this is probably one of the coolest things that I've seen. You may have even seen the one that I'm going to show you, but you can make your own. You don't have to stick with this one that I'm about to show you. You can make whatever decision tree makes sense for your campaign world if you're a DM, or use this if you're just a player and you're trying to look at something to figure out what to do. So, credit where credit is due. I will leave a link to this in the description of this video so that you can go do it yourself and make all these choices. It's really fun to kind of go through the tree. So let's take a look. First question up, and again, I'm going to answer this for Ezra. So Ezra is already got a background. He's the character that we're working on, but I'm also going to answer it from the perspective of I'm a brand new player, because I think when you do these, you need to look at it from the perspective of the character and what you think they would do, but also how do you want to play, because that's going to factor in. So first question's up. How do you react to danger? Well, we've got 2 choices. I don't mind charging in, and I'll deal with it from a distance. Brand new player, maybe I don't want to just charge in because I don't want to lose my character right off the bat, or I don't want to lose D&D, quote unquote. So, and Ezra, thinking about what I've got him in the past, he's kind of, I think, examines the situation based on the backstory we've got so far. So I'm going to say I deal with it from a safe distance, which then leads me to another decision I have to make. What do I rely on most, skills or magic? So I just went on and on about skills earlier and how rogues were awesome when they have skills, but there's just something about playing a game with magic and then not choosing the magic that just doesn't seem right to me. So I'm going to go with magic. So let's scroll down. We'll carry it down to the next choice. I want. Okay. Got 3 choices here. I want magical stamina for days. I want flexibility. Or I want 1 or 2 supernatural nukes. That's hard, because who doesn't want all 3 of these, especially when they say supernatural nukes? That's kind of tempting. Okay. However, the pragmatic person in me is going to say that Ezra is going to be flexible. He's from, if I remember right, a pretty small town area, and he's going to think this through and go, I want to make choices in my life that give me the most options. As a player, a new player, maybe I don't want to lock myself into it, so I'm going to go flexible. And then I have the choice, am I the academic type? Either no, not necessarily, or I'm a bookworm. I'm going to say he is a academic type, which leads me to say Ezra Wright is a wizard. That's what we're going to go with. I like it. Now, let's just step one step back. We'll go back to that same question, and let's see what would have happened if I had said not necessarily. Okay, not necessarily. Is he religious? Define religious. Or, no, my power comes from my righteous loot solos. Or, no, my power comes from within. And if you remember what we talked about earlier, it makes sense here, right? I'm going to say, no, my power comes from within, which then leads me to Sorcerer. So you see how this works. Use this as an example. Go check it out. Kudos to whoever came up with this and put it together. I think it's great. The thing I like about this way of doing things is it's leaning in on you making decisions. The more you can lean towards making decisions, the easier transition it's going to be into roleplay. All right, that's it. Next time we will go into some subclasses for wizards, it looks like, because we need to talk about those. So let me leave you with a quote that's pretty appropriate. And this is from Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, the book. Harry, you're a wizard.